Russians have always had a rather interesting style of politics. For example, following the reign of Ivan the Terrible, an impostor from Poland falsified royal lineage and claimed the throne in Moscow. When the people of the city heard of this, they rushed into the Kremlin, dragged the man out into the streets, incinerated his body after decapitating him, stuffed the ashes into a cannon, and returned the body to its country of origin. Unfortunately, Russia is not the only country that can play this game in the modern world, and China is a rising power that seems to be set to challenge them for the most interesting and clever ways to steal territory. In fact, as Foreign Affairs, the Journal of International Relations explains in its March-April 2011 edition, China is the new power that will be brokering the order in the international community. While they may not necessarily be the most powerful, they are certainly going to be one of the most important. And it is in light of China's recent actions with regard to the Siberian that experts in the field of international relations are posing the following question in order to better understand potential courses of action for Russian policy. What does the significant increase in Chinese immigration to the Russian Siberia mean for Russia's relations with NATO? The answer is it portends a significant increase in Russia's interaction with Europe and NATO as a whole. But to fully understand this answer, we must first look to why the Siberian is so key to the Russian economy. Second, put this expansion in the context of broader Chinese military expansion. And finally, look to the actions by many NATO members that suggest they will be increasing relations with Russia in the future. Ultimately, trying to understand Russia is something that was best explained by Winston Churchill. It's a riddle wrapped in a mystery surrounded by an enigma. And we must turn first to the riddle of why Russia cares about a giant frozen parking lot. The answer is, put simply, money. Now, Russia's economy finds itself in a rather dangerous situation. As the Washington Post explains in its March 8, 2011 edition, many Russians, in order to protest things they don't like about the government, are simply leaving. This has led to not only a brain and capital drain, but also an actual decline in their population, leaving their economy very vulnerable. The one bright spot is provided by the Siberian. As the April 14, 2011 edition of The Guardian of London explains, the primary driving force between Russia's economy are massive levels of oil and natural gas in the Siberia. They're in fact so great that BP and Rosneft, the primary national Russian oil corporation, are considering a merger specifically with the goal of exploiting these resources. Thus, the fact that China is moving on them is all the more threatening. The March 10, 2011 edition of BBC News explains that if Russia were to lose access to these resources, their economy, and in fact their entire stability as a nation, would be in jeopardy. But it is not just the riddle of Russian politics that we must understand. We also must understand the mystery of China's military and recognize the fact that when you take their recent military developments coupled with their actions toward the Siberian, Russia has a lot of reasons to be worried. The Christian Science Monitor, in its January 10th edition, notes that at the same time that Secretary of Defense Robert Gates from the United States was visiting China to discuss cooperation on global issues, China's military unveiled a new fighter craft, the J-20. Now, the J-20 is slated to go online in approximately 7 years, and it is designed to have many of the same capabilities as the US F-22 Raptor. It is an air superiority, super cruise-capable stealth fighter. The fact that they're developing this kind of technology is very threatening to Russia. Moreover, China is taking actions to specifically undermine the one key sector of Russia's economy, their energy markets. As the March 10th edition of the New York Times explains, a recent round of attacks by Chinese hackers specifically targeted energy firms throughout the world, such as BP and Rosneft. China is taking direct military actions against Russia, albeit in a somewhat unconventional form. And they are moving to attain one of the greatest symbols of prestige of an international power. As the New York Times explains in its April 7, 2011 edition, China is projected to deploy its first supercarrier in approximately 2 years. Now, this is a piece of military hardware that in the past had been restricted to only the United States and Russia, the two traditional superpowers. The fact that China is moving to incorporate this weapon into its arsenal, at the same time that it is directly threatening the heart of Russia's economy, does not bode well for Russian-Chinese relations. But while this is interesting, European politics is often an enigma all its own, and we need to consider this, and NATO more broadly, in order to see what Russia will actually do in response to this. We can turn first to the European response to many Chinese actions. As the April 4th edition of The Guardian explains, France and Germany, two of the leaders in European diplomacy, have stepped up their criticism of China over recent human rights abuses and currency manipulation in the field of economics. This suggests that they would be very amenable to a negotiation with Russia to counter China's growing economic and military threat. But what about the leader of NATO, the United States? Well, in fact, as the Washington Post explains in its April 4th edition, when Joe Biden recently visited the country, he said that he was looking to accomplish a reset of US-Russian relations. And yes, there had been some unpleasantries between Bush and Putin, but Biden and the Obama administration believe that the US and Russia can work together to curtail various threats to international stability, like China. And ultimately, where might they act directly? Well, a perfect example is provided by the New York Times in its April 7th edition, which notes that in addition to immigration into Russian Siberia, China is also attempting to all but colonize South America. Their goal is through economic development to build trade ties with many South American nations and spread their power base around the world. Russia and the United States and NATO as a whole can work to develop the energy infrastructure in South America jointly as a counter to Chinese influence. Thus, with a clear policy option available for the US and Russia to pursue, we see that the opportunity for alliance is very high. And so when considering the admittedly quite timely and interesting question, what does the significant increase in immigration from China to the Russian Siberia signify for Russia and NATO relations? The answer is it suggests a major opportunity for improved relations. We consider first why the Siberian is so key to Russia. It is, in their view, an existential issue. Secondly, look to the fact that China is building up their military capabilities to augment their economic capabilities. And finally, we see that NATO and Russia have opportunities abroad to counter China's influence. It seems that, yes, China is trying to play the game in international politics that Russia has in the past. But Russia has another ace up their sleeve. As Garry Kasparov, noted chess champion and one-time presidential candidate of Russia, said in an interview with Stephen Colbert on the Colbert Report. Colbert, so when you're planning your political strategy in the run, are you playing it like a game of chess, thinking 50 or 60 moves ahead? No, I can't. You see, in chess, there are rules. They govern your opponent. They make him predictable. They allow you to anticipate what he will do. In Russian politics, there are no rules.